After such a beautiful choir number, I'm going to start the sermon with a word totally opposite: scorn. Because in today's Bible reading, Jesus started speaking in scornful insults again. He had already given it to the religious leaders of the time. Listen to these harsh words from Luke 11:37-44, not part of today's reading. While he was speaking, a Pharisee invited him to dine with him. So he went in and took his place at the table. The Pharisee was amazed to see that he did not first wash before dinner. Then the Lord said to him, Jesus said to the Pharisee, "Now you Pharisees clean the outside of the cup and of the dish, but inside you're full of greed and wickedness. You fools! Did not the one who made the outside make the inside also? So give alms for those things that are within, and see, everything will be clean for you. But woe to you, Pharisees, for you tithe mint and rue and herbs of all kinds, and neglect justice and the love of God. It is these you ought to have practiced without neglecting the others. Woe to you, Pharisees, for you love to have your seat of honor in the synagogues, and to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces. Woe to you, for you are like unmarked graves, and people walk all over them without realizing it." So he'd already said that. And then in this week's reading from Luke 13:31-35, he called Herod a fox. Clever like a fox? Maybe. Crazy like a fox? Perhaps. Good looking like a fox? That did not commute in Bible times. Compute. Commute? No, that slang didn't work. How about lowly, slinking, not a lion like a fox? Yes, that. Jesus was not paying any kind of respect to Herod. He was sending a message, one that may or may not reach Herod through the Pharisees, that Herod was merely a weak excuse for a ruler who couldn't do anything without the emperor's okay. If the message reached Herod, Jesus was in trouble. If he didn't, he was still in trouble. He just scornfully insulted someone the Pharisees thought was important. So message sent. But then comes something equally as important and delivered not so much to the leaders who would hear it later, but to the ones listening at the time. Jesus went from prophet to pastor just like that. He lamented. He spoke with anguish about Jerusalem. They had a puppet ruler. They didn't listen to God's prophets. They killed them instead. And he wished he could gather them up like a hen gathers her brood under her wings. Not necessarily just to protect them from the slinking fox, but also to help them to experience what was truly important: love and community. And he lamented that they weren't willing. They were willing to be scattered where the fox could pick them off one by one, but not gathered under the hen's wings. Gathering implies this willingness to work together, to be together. And some people wonder if Jesus just wanted the brood to gather against a common enemy, the fox, Herod in this case. But if that was the case, he probably wouldn't have used the warm, nurturing, loving, and feminine imagery of a hen. If you're going to team up against a common enemy, you'd use a lion or an eagle. Those are good Old Testament images to help build up confidence for the people to rise up with power and violence against a common enemy. And that's not the way Jesus does things. Jesus wasn't, and Jesus isn't the warrior who comes to wipe out the enemy and set things right. Jesus comes in care, in peace, nurturing and loving all. And the imagery in the reading today, it's a female image, a mother, as to how God works and how God is. See, God isn't really defined by a particular gender. We can describe God in many ways, and today we've got a feminine imagery that describes God. So Jesus' example reminds us that God's love for all is extraordinarily patient, unending, and unconditional. It reminds us that coming together and living out that unconditional love is the plan. Hunkering down and planning a stealth attack or an all-out offensive or anything to do with a takeover is not God's plan. Threats of violence lead to violence. Anger, seeking revenge, and easy access to weapons is a recipe for tragedy and terror. It's not a theory. We see it all the time. Jesus was not about takeovers. So we must gather, be together, not against a common enemy necessarily, but for a common good. And how are we gathered together? Why are we gathered together? You know? I mean, we're the church. We gather together to help those in need. We gather together to comfort those who have suffered loss. We gather together to feed the hungry. We gather together to be merciful. We gather together to advocate for a just peace, to advocate for justice, to advocate for liberation of the oppressed. We gather together to show hospitality. We gather together to live out God's unconditional love. That's what we're about. I know that Jesus did not have kind words for Herod or for the Pharisees. But Herod and the Pharisees never were outside God's unconditional love. Just because they didn't show good examples of showing that love or living out that love didn't mean they were outside. And when I say they, it's hard because humanity is this giant we, us. God's love is for all, even the people that we think don't deserve it, even the people we're so angry at. I know that if I was in charge, I wouldn't be that way. I'd be like, oh no, out, 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 you're in, you're out. God is like, you're in. You're part of the family. God's love, God's mercy, God's grace are unconditional. I can't tell you how that works with people who do just such evil things in the world. I just know that God's love is unconditional. God's mercy, God's grace are unending. They are eternal. Remember that we're gathered not to just rest and hope that things will be better. We are a vibrant, inclusive Christian community living out love, respect, and dignity for everyone. So let's actively live out mercy. Let's actively live out peace. Let's actively live out justice, liberation, hospitality, and love. This day, during Lent, in all seasons, whether it's snowing or not, let's be the church together. Amen.